Hi, oh my goodness, I'm live. I've had to turn off my internet because I think my connection wasn't good enough to connect onto. So, panic over. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the We Are Fit and Well Instagram Live. I'm going to be taking over for the next 20 to 30 minutes. Good to see there's people on you there now. It's all a bit of a panic, this technology. So I'm going to be taking over for the next 20 to 30 minutes. My name's Alex Cook and I'm a registered dietitian and I specialise in sport and predominantly specialise in endurance. I'm also currently working with Red Bull. I'm also a UK athletics coach and I'm a runner. So much like you, I'm probably constantly trying to juggle work, family, training, and just trying to get that balance right. And obviously, trying to eat well and your nutrition is just another aspect of the puzzle that we try to nail and sort every day. So this morning I'm going to talk to you about sports nutrition. Obviously it's a very, very broad subject and I won't be able to fit loads of things into the next 20 to 30 minutes. But even if you can all just take away just even one glimmer of information that's going to make a difference to your day or make a difference to your recovery or make a difference to how you feel when you go to the gym at 7 o'clock in the morning, then I feel like I've done a good job. I thought a really good way of approaching this would be to cherry pick the questions that I tend to get asked by my athletes. So I work on one-to-one with athletes and people that exercise on a daily basis, and I tend to find that the same questions do come up quite a lot. So I thought that would be quite a good way to give information across to you. And I also put a shout out to my Instagram followers to see if anyone had any particular burning questions that they wanted me to answer. If any of you do have any questions, I will try and answer at the end if I can scroll through and if I have time. And also you can contact me directly if you've got any burning questions about what I'm going to speak about today. So one basic question I think is good to start off with is, when we're exercising, how important is diet compared to the training, the activities you were doing? And I find that a lot of people naturally invest a lot of time and a lot of money into their training, what they're doing, planning out their training on a weekly basis, paying for their gym, paying for a coach. But I do find that a lot of people seem to sort of put their nutrition as sort of one of the last things they think about. Even if, I'm working with sort of top GB athletes, it's really surprising how some of them will sort of only start considering potentially what they're eating if suddenly they're finding they're not recovering quicker or they're getting injured more often. But it's really important that you look at all aspects of health and well-being when it comes down to your training. And actually I always use the analogy, which I'm sure you've all heard before, you wouldn't put the wrong fuel into your car and expect it to run properly. And it's the same with so many of us. The human body is really, really resilient, and you do find that, we can train and we can exercise well, even if we, aren't eating as well as we should. The body will always prioritise movement. So the body will always try and exercise and move, despite what fuel you are or you aren't giving it. But the differences I see in my athletes or my clients when they do just think a little bit more about what they're eating and how they're fueling makes their performance considerably better. Because in essence, if you recover from a session quicker, then you can train harder in your next session. So thinking about your diet, and it's about getting that balance as well. It's not about me wanting you to constantly think throughout your whole day and obsessing about your diet and what you're eating. Obviously, again, that's not a level we want to go to either. But it's about just sort of getting that sort of questioning and planning and thinking ahead. So a second question I think a lot of people tend to, when they think of sports nutrition, they tend to think almost too deeply straight away. A lot of people will straight away go to think, well, do I need supplements? Do I need protein shakes? Do I need to be taking these tablets and these pills or these drinks? But actually, if you view your sports nutrition like a triangle, so from the baseline up, so at the bottom of the triangle, you have your biggest, broadest base, and that's your baseline nutrition. So your baseline nutrition is basically your baseline diet, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then once you've got that right, then you can start thinking about your sports nutrition. So the triangle goes up, and your sports nutrition is basically sort of how many carbs you're going to have around your training session, how many grams of protein you're going to have to make sure you're recovering properly. And then once you've looked at all of that, then finally you have your supplements. And if then your baseline diet and your sports nutrition isn't quite right, so for example you're a vegan and you're not managing to get enough iron, then you might think about supplements as your last call. So it's always like a food first approach, and the aim is to sort of look and get the core of your eating habits, and so many of us are leading these busy lives, and actually if you don't get the core of what we're having properly, so making sure we're getting 3 meals a day, making sure we're getting enough fibre, making sure we're getting enough fruit and veg, so we're getting our vitamins and minerals. So even though it's a bit dull and probably a little bit basic, you want to be getting a well-balanced diet before you try anything. So ask yourself these questions, am I eating 3 meals a day? Am I eating a balanced amount of food groups at each meal? So have I got some protein? Have I got some carbohydrate? Have I got some vegetables or salad? Am I drinking enough water during the day? Always making sure that you've got your glass or your water bottle with you. And am I eating 5 to 7 portions of fruit and veg a day? And it's about bringing things back to basics. And I find, I've been working in sports nutrition now for 15 years, and I think things do get very complicated. And I think additionally, the world of social media makes things quite complicated as well, because you get all these conflicting ideas and thoughts as to what you should be doing and how you should be fueling. And it's about sort of reducing that confusion and actually starting with your basics first and making sure that you're getting your baseline diet correct before you move on. Okay, so another really topic that people come to me is about weight loss, and I find that a lot of people think about weight loss. I work predominantly with runners and endurance athletes, so I'm sure a lot of you listening are runners. It's quite a handy sport just to throw on your trainers and go out for a 20-minute run. So a lot of people will tend to come to me probably at the wrong time wanting to lose weight. So they might, for example, I do tend to find people that have, say, entered the London Marathon in April, and they'll come to me in January and say, I'm running the London Marathon in April, I want to lose some weight. But leading up, a few months out of a big race is not the time to start looking to lose weight. If you want to lose weight, or you think that you could benefit from losing weight, then looking to do it when you're not building up to a race is the best time to do it. Because when you're sort of 3 months out of a big goal or a big race, you want to be focusing on performance and actually trying to lose weight. You don't want to lose that ability to perform well in your training. So quite often I will say to people, it's about getting that balance, because if you're restricting your intake too much and then you can't perform well in the gym, or you can't perform well in your class, or you can't go out and do that run very well, then you're not going to be most out of your training, and you're not going to be pushing your body to the point that you would be able to if you're well fueled. So it's about just getting that balance right of being able to train properly, but trying to maybe reduce some of the calories that you're having. So sometimes it only even takes just maybe removing those extra calories out of your diet. So maybe not reaching for that bit of cake, maybe not having that packet of crisps with your glass of wine before dinner. And even just by doing small little changes like that will reduce your intake by sort of 200 to 400 calories a day. And that sometimes is enough just to reduce that bit of weight. So it's about looking at your year and thinking what your aims are with your sport or your exercise, and choosing a time when performance is not your priority, if that makes sense. So maybe, times when training is a little bit easier and you can maybe focus on trying to sort of lose a little bit more weight through tweaking your diet a bit is the best time to do it. So my next question that I was given are, what are the best foods to eat before a workout, and how long should I let what I've eaten settle before undertaking exercise? So a lot of people will just sort of focus and tend to think that it's just what you have before and after your session that's important. But I think one point I want to make here is that it's not just about that immediate sort of moment of before and after your exercise, and then the rest of the time it doesn't matter. Your body responds to sort of a consistency, and so what you're looking at is sort of consistent good feeling over time. So say, for example, you feel well before your spinning session in the morning, but then the next day you tend to skip a meal because you're busy. That's not then going to help your session the next day. So before you exercise is really important for that session, but additionally you want to make sure that you're getting consistent good fueling before you're training all the time. So before, let's say for example, you've got a spinning session at 9 o'clock in the morning, ideally you want to be fueling sort of 2 to 3 hours before that and sort of having a decent meal. Everybody exercises at different times of the day. So I always say to my clients, try and go by the rule of having a proper balanced meal 2 to 4 hours before you exercise. So some people can eat much closer to their training, and some people need longer. It depends on you as an individual, but 2 to 4 hours is quite a good time. And so you don't want to be having anything that's too high in protein, anything that's too high in fat, because protein and fat take longer to digest, and so there's more risk of it being sit in your stomach by the time you start your exercise session. So obviously we want to be having some carbohydrate, because carbohydrate is what's going to fuel our session. So we want to make sure our glycogen stores, which is where we store our carbohydrate, is full and maximum, so that we can fuel through that session. So say for example in the morning, if you're going to be doing a spinning session at 9 o'clock, a couple of hours before, you could have something like some oats with some banana and honey, or maybe a bagel with peanut butter, just something that's going to be easy to digest, but it's just going to get your energy levels up. You could also have some caffeine. I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit more detail in a minute, so I'm just going to park that one there. But obviously caffeine before we exercise can be really beneficial as well. As I said, it's very individual, and if you take longer, or if potentially you seem to get bad tummies, maybe when you run, you want to give yourself a little bit longer. But the idea is that you eat and make sure that food is digested and processed, so that the energy is readily available for that exercise session. Okay, the next one. Number, how long should a run or workout be to warrant taking on fuel during it? Now this is quite, because obviously everybody watching this is going to be doing different sports and different activities. But the rule of thumb is that most of us will have carbohydrate stores long enough to fuel us for about sort of 90 minutes of exercise. So if we're going to be keeping things simple and giving you sort of just simple guidelines, anything less than 90 minutes, really you shouldn't need to take on extra carbohydrate when you're exercising. However, if you're going to be doing something longer than 90 minutes, you want to start thinking about taking on some carbohydrate. Likewise, if you're doing classes, I know a lot of people will do a couple of classes back to back. So say for example, you're doing an hour of body pump, and then you have maybe a 10-minute break, and you're going straight into 45-minute spin. Even though you've got a break in between, you probably want to be taking on something between those classes to make sure that you're just topping up your energy levels, to make sure that you've got enough fuel there ready for your next session. Additionally, you could take some sports drink, but also with sports drink, you've got to take into the consideration the constant exposure to sugar to your teeth, which obviously isn't ideal. So it's probably not something you want to be doing all the time. But anything longer than 90 minutes, we want to be taking on. So you could take on a gel. You could sometimes have sports drink. If you do have a gap between classes, then potentially you could take just a cereal bar or a banana. If you're doing something slightly lower intensity, so say for example, if I go to the gym, I can sometimes be wondering about the gym and going from weights and free weights and stuff. I can be in there for an hour and a half, maybe sometimes 2 hours. But it probably isn't necessary to take on carbs whilst you're doing that, because it's very low intensity. So you're not going to be burning through that stored carbohydrate at such a rate. So really only if you're doing sort of cardio-based exercise for longer than 90 minutes, that's a slightly sort of higher heart rate, then you want to be thinking about taking on some carbohydrate during that. Okay, so this is a good one. So protein shakes. This is something that comes up quite a lot with a lot of my athletes, and you read a lot about protein shakes in the media. Obviously, it's a massive industry, but I think the question is, do we have to have them? And I think so many of us, because they're everywhere and we are, sort of bombarded with different protein shakes and different brands, and even when we go to the supermarkets now, we've got them there. So it kind of leads us all to think that really we should be having them. If we're exercising, should we, if we're now sort of sporty and exercising a lot or gym goers, maybe we should be having protein shakes. So should you be having a protein shake after exercise? And this person here says that they don't really like them. So if they should be having something similar, what's the best recovery shake to have after a session, and how quickly do I need to have it? Now protein, and actually that runs into another question later on about high protein diets for endurance athletes. So I'll kind of band them both together, I think. Protein is obviously one of our main macronutrients that we need to fuel our sport. It's a main nutrient for recovery, and I'd say that the majority of people, when you say, tell me what you think of when I say recovery, and most people say protein. And a lot of people will reach for a protein shake after they've done a session, mainly because obviously you're getting 30 grams of protein in one drink, which is great, and additionally they're very convenient. So there is a place for protein shakes, and I'm certainly not against them. I think if you are struggling with time, for example, you go to the gym and you haven't managed to bring any food with you, then yes, taking a protein shake would probably be good. I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, we want a food first approach, where we're not using supplements, because they are expensive and a lot of them probably don't taste, they're not the most tasty things that you could have. So, but it is important, protein is really important for anyone that's exercising. And most of us people that don't exercise need between 0.8 and 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. But obviously depending on what your sport is. So if you're doing bodybuilding or weightlifting, you're trying to increase your bulk, you probably need a higher end, so maybe about 1.8 to maybe 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And if you're an endurance athlete or a runner or a cyclist, then you need a little bit less, so between sort of 1.2 and 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. But what is key here is not about sort of the little numbers, is simply making sure you have protein at every meal throughout the day. So none of us have time to be measuring numbers and measuring how much grams of protein we have. But just making sure that you're having a portion of protein at breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then after potentially in your snacks as well, depending on your level of training. So after we train, protein is important, but additionally, let's give the example of you've gone to do a gym session mid-morning before you go into the office. If anyone's going into the office anymore, I think most of us are all now just working from home, aren't we? But let's just use that as an example. So you've done your gym session and then you're going to the office. Well, actually, if you've done your gym session and you get to the office and within an hour you're having a proper balanced lunch with, at least 20 grams of protein in it, then really you don't need to be having that protein shake. If you're not going to be having a meal for a couple of hours, then maybe a protein shake would be a good idea. But additionally, you can make your own. If you just put sort of 300 to 500 mils of milk in a blender, you put in a tablespoon of peanut butter, maybe some chia seeds, a banana and some oats, and whiz it all up, you pretty much have 20 to 25 grams of protein in that as well. So there are ways of doing it yourself, but obviously it just depends on time and convenience. So yes, the answer is protein shakes are fine after exercise session. They're not essential, just so long you're having a proper meal straight after. Okay, so the next question when we're one on supplements is caffeine. This question is, should I take caffeine before exercise and will it help me? Now, so many people, the supplement industry is massive. It's huge, and so there is obviously a place for some of these supplements, but I remember once when I was studying, a professor once said with regard to supplements and claims, if it sounds too good to be true, it normally is. But actually caffeine is one of the whether we can call it a supplement, obviously you can take caffeine supplements, which we'll talk about in a minute, but obviously caffeine does come in a very natural form, and it is something that actually has really, really great evidence behind its sort of improving and helping performance. So caffeine does really, really help exercise. So if you want to use caffeine or like a caffeine based drink, such as Red Bull or some of the other energy drinks that have caffeine in, then you will get maximum benefit out of your training, but you need to use it strategically. So caffeine, predominantly the majority of us will use caffeine because it is a stimulant and it will give us a boost. But you have to use it, you have to understand how to use it and in the right way. So if we use caffeine before exercise, one really, really key thing to remember is that actually it takes, even though the caffeine starts to absorb within 15 minutes into our body, actually we're not going to get the peak benefits of that caffeine stimulation until about 45 minutes in. So quite often a lot of us will have a coffee or something like that, and we will instantly go, oh, I feel much better, I feel more awake. However, the reality of it is that's almost a little bit of a placebo, because the full effect of the caffeine doesn't take effect until 45 minutes. So you'll often hear sleep experts say, if you want to have a mid-afternoon nap, have a coffee, lie down, have your 45-minute nap. So by the time you wake up, that caffeine will suddenly have hit and you'll wake up feeling like $1 million. It's a really nice thought. I've never managed to do it myself. But if you look at the science and the way caffeine is absorbed, then that totally makes sense. So it depends when you want to have that hit of caffeine. So let's say, for example, you're doing a 5K race. 5K is a short time. It's not a marathon. It's a short time. So you probably want that caffeine boost just as you start your race. So ideally you want to really be having that caffeine boost 45 minutes. So you could have it probably with your breakfast is probably a little bit early, because you have time between your breakfast, that 2 to 3 hours. So you probably then want to be having maybe another sort of caffeine boost 45 minutes to an hour before you exercise, to make sure that you're getting that maximum benefit. Additionally, if you're going to be using caffeine, say within a marathon, you want to use it strategically. So you want to think, where do you want to have that extra boost? So if any of you have run marathons, you know that once you reach about 20 miles, the last 6 miles are almost like the first 20. So really you probably want that caffeine boost in that last 6 miles. So if you want it to be hitting at mile 20, you probably need to be taking that caffeine gel or caffeine drink 45 minutes before you think you're going to get to that point. So it's about thinking ahead and actually using caffeine strategically in your fueling. I've got another question about myths actually, so I think I might mix that in whilst I'm here. There are a couple of myths, I'd say 2 big myths that surround caffeine, and one of them is that caffeine dehydrates you, and that myth is still circulating around. I still have so many people say to me, I need to reduce the amount of caffeine that I'm having because I know it's dehydrating, but actually caffeine does not dehydrate you. Anything with caffeine into tea and coffee actually counts towards your fluid intake in a day. So, obviously within moderate amounts, I've had some clients come to me that, have an extremely high intake of coffee and tea, which obviously, you want to reduce, because too much caffeine isn't ideal, but in moderation. So we would say, up to four coffees a day is termed as moderate intake, and actually it doesn't dehydrate you, which is great news. I'm hoping that so many of you are suddenly feeling like you want to celebrate that actually caffeine isn't as bad as so many people think it is, because it's not. So it will count towards your fluid intake in a day. And I think also another bit of a myth is a lot of people tend to think that if you cut out caffeine for a while, so abstain from caffeine for a while, then reintroduce it, you will respond better to it. The thought behind it makes sense. You'd sort of think if you're using common sense that would be the case, but actually there's no evidence behind cutting out caffeine then suddenly reintroducing it before a big race so that you respond better to it. Additionally, everybody responds differently to caffeine. Some people respond really well and are very sensitive to it, and some people can, drink 3 espressos before they go to bed and it not affect them. So again, you've got to remember all this information here that I'm talking about is very general, and it's not individualised to any of you, but hopefully you can take a few bits from what I've said there about caffeine and use it strategically and for your own plans. Okay, so working from home. Yes. So working from home is really tough. I think it's really tough for all of us. I would so much rather be standing in front of a big stage now with all of you in front of me than actually sitting looking at my phone, looking at myself. But this is what we're all doing now, and working from home is really tough. And somebody asked me, how can we keep our energy levels up all day long? So I think with regards to that, I think ironically, I think some people have responded really well to working from home and actually are eating better and are exercising more. But I think there's also people that aren't responding that well to it and seem to find that they get up, stumble out of bed, sit in front of their computers all day, and generally are not being as active. So I think, for those people, it's really important. There are certainly different things that you can do to keep that activity up and keep your energy levels up. Obviously exercise, and it's not just exercise, and actually I speak to this about quite a few people. I think when we talk about exercise, a lot of people that aren't that interested in it, or it doesn't come naturally, kind of almost feel sort of they want to give up before they've even started, because they feel this big pressure that exercise needs to be running, needs to be smashing out the weights at the gym, needs to be, you know, spinning or going on your bike. But actually it's just about movement. And you know, I think so many people working from home now will just sit in this position all day long and not move. But it's about, you know, if you have a phone call, walk about, you know, go outside and walk and just get in those footsteps. Don't feel pressure that it has to be exercise. It's just about moving our bodies and keeping going. Additionally, with regard to food, at home we have, it's probably a lot easier just to sort of dip into the cupboard and grab these snacks here, there and everywhere, compared to when we're in the office where we're surrounded by people, and it's not so easy just to escape and go and grab food. But it's about just trying to keep that routine and make sure that you are taking out time for lunch, and you know, you are making sure that you're getting that good balance of your protein, lots of you know, salads and fruit, and making sure you're just getting lots of wholesome fresh foods, because actually all of that all together will then make you feel a lot more positive in the day and give you a lot more energy. You know, you can also you know, use caffeine to you know, strategically give you boost during the day. You know, you don't want to be sort of constantly going back to back cups of coffee and cups of tea. You know, mix it up with water as well, because that keeps us hydrated and that keeps us more alert. So it's just about sort of making sure you're moving about more, I think, because actually the more sedentary you are, the less energy you have. So it's just about making sure you're moving around, making sure you're taking time out to have a meal, and you know, thinking and perhaps meal planning ahead, you know, planning what you're going to have. You know, sometimes having leftovers from the night before is good to have for your lunch the next day with sort of minimal prep. So yeah, it's just about sort of keeping variety, I think, in your day. Right, any more questions? I don't actually know how long I've been talking for, to be honest. But I think sports nutrition, you know, it's such a big topic, and you know, obviously I've talked about very different things over the last sort of 20 minutes, but I think the really key point for all of you is to not complicate things. Really limit how much you're exposing yourself to on social media, because I think that can really complicate things, and a lot of information on social media is not individualized to you, so make sure that you keep it basic. It's not complicated. You know, don't go cutting out food groups because you've heard somebody said that, you know, gluten is bad for you, or dairy, you know, dairy is the next worst thing. It's about remaining individualized and trying to remain informed yourself, and reading up, you know, registered sports nutritionists, sports dietitians, making sure you're listening to the right people. Anyone that's giving their personal opinion, you know, I've cut out carbohydrate and suddenly I'm running, you know, much faster. That's very individualised to that person. It's not necessarily going to work for you. So just be aware. I hope that you have found this useful. You can contact me if you've got any questions. This is going to be saved onto the We Are Fit and Well Instagram page, and also onto their YouTube, so you can go back and listen to it maybe in your own time. But thank you all for joining, and have a good Monday.